Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Wouldn't it be a better world if we could all get along? Now I know this sounds super simple and potentially naive, but the fact is folks, that politics is about timing, it's about opportunity, tribalism and perception. Now tribalism essentially involves anger, it involves resentment. It's about us against them. I don't think that Mitch McConnell is going to get anywhere if he says, oh, President Biden has some great ideas. I think he's a wonderful president. Let's tweak his ideas a little bit and make them better. Let's all work together and have a kumbaya moment. No. That is not what the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell will say. In fact, he said this is a totally left-wing administration trying to transform America into something no one voted for last year. Yep, folks, tribalism involves us against them. It involves essentially the political parties demonizing the opposition, and that not only leads to more votes, that leads to more fundraising, which I'm about to explain in a couple of minutes. But first, let's hear from the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell as he dismisses President Biden's administration as a totally left-wing administration that is not indicative of the will of the American people. Pretty strong comments. Let's roll the tape and hear from the Senate Minority Leader.
Well, what I'm concentrating on is the future. And what we are confronted with here is a totally left-wing administration with a slight majority in the House, a 50-50 Senate, trying to transform America into something no one voted for last year. No one voted to transform America into something totally different. 50-50 Senate, couple of seat majority in the House. They want to try to fundamentally change America into something it's never been.
Yep, it's very clear that the Senate Minority Leader is not happy with President Biden. According to new reporting, and you'll see this tweet on your screen from Steve Dennis, who's a Bloomberg Senate reporter, Mitch McConnell blasted President Biden's plans to shrink the $11 million estate tax exemption and President Biden's plan to tax unrealized capital gains greater than $1 million at death. Now, first of all, folks, let me break this down for you. Let's say a rich person accumulates $15 million worth of assets, properties, stocks, whatever. And then this person passes away. The way the law is written right now is that up to $11 million of estate value, there is no tax on inheritances up to $11 million. Now, this is oversimplifying things, but you can talk to an accountant if you have more than $11 million that you're going to leave to someone. Also, unrealized capital gains, as long as they are not realized, if someone inherits them, then, for the most part, unless the inheritance is worth several million dollars, there is no capital gains, there is no tax paid by the recipient, by the beneficiary. So what President Biden wants to do is he wants to essentially shrink that $11 million estate tax exemption, and he wants to shrink it down. He wants to shrink it down significantly. And President Biden wants to tax any capital gains that are not realized, that are in excess of $1 million when a person dies. Right now, when a rich person dies, there's something called a stepped up basis, which means the heirs, the beneficiaries, can enjoy millions of dollars by way of an inheritance without paying taxes. Now, this is what McConnell said. The exemption would be lowered to $1 million, which, by the way, is a Biden proposal, which may sound like a lot of money to some people. I think $1 million is a lot of money to everyone I know, just so that we're clear, okay? Just so that we're clear. But anyway, McConnell says the exemption would be lowered to $1 million, which may sound like a lot of money to some people, but not if you've got a small business or a family farm. So, there you have it. Words from the Senate Minority Leader. Now, keep in mind that McConnell, and this is pointed out by Steve Dennis, McConnell has backed Senator John Thune, who's the number 2 Republican in the Senate, Thune's proposal to eliminate the estate tax entirely. In other words, what Senator McConnell wants is for the rich to not have to pay the estate tax, and Biden is simply saying, hey, we're going to make it such that you pay more estate taxes. You can see how far apart both sides are. One side wants to eliminate it entirely. The other side wants to lower the threshold so that more taxes are paid by those rich people. Pretty incredible. And here's again another tweet from Steve Dennis. McConnell does not see Republican support for undoing the tax law. And by the way, that tax law, the 2017 tax law from former President Trump, set up the $11 million exemption. But he's saying that the Biden infrastructure plan should be paid for. They are calling for a much narrower traditional infrastructure version. That's what the Republicans are doing. Folks, you have heard me say this before. There is a world in which we can have infrastructure without raising taxes on anyone, and that world is a very special place called La La Land. Now let's talk anger, frustration and resentment for just a second. Let's talk tribalism. Here's a very interesting segment featuring Jon Stewart. And Jon Stewart was actually speaking with NBC Nightly News in an exclusive. And he said this, folks, I couldn't have said it any better. He said, we set aside money for war, but we don't set aside money for the true cost of war. Let's check out the one and only Jon Stewart.
We set aside money for war, but we don't set aside money for the true cost of war.
Yep. Pretty interesting. Tell you what, let's hear that one more time because I think it's significant. Let's hear Jon Stewart once again.
We set aside money for war, but we don't set aside money for the true cost of war.
Very powerful stuff, very important stuff. I want to give a lot of credit to Jon Stewart. He's calling for medical coverage for veterans that were harmed by burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, here's another segment with Stewart where he says the toxic wounds are as real as any physical wound that you would get from war. Folks, we live in a highly divided climate, and the reason I'm highlighting this is, we need to be able to somehow try and come together to help those who need it the most, as opposed to constantly fight and constantly use tribalism to further drive a wedge between ourselves. And I have news for you. Unfortunately, tribalism works. Tribalism sells. But first, let's take a look at this message from Jon Stewart before I give you proof that tribalism does indeed sell. Let's roll the tape and hear one more time from Jon Stewart.
Unfortunately, Walter Reed Bethesda is world class in dealing with injuries of war because they've had to deal with them so often. But if you have a toxic wound, and I'm telling you, the toxic wounds are as real as any physical wound that you would get from war, they don't know what to do with you.
Now, there are many individuals in both parties that essentially take advantage of us against them, take advantage of tribalism to further divide us. One such individual is Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican from Texas, and another rather interesting individual is the Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. There he is. What's up, Josh? Now, Josh Hawley essentially burst onto the scene when the stimulus packages were being negotiated because he supported the independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, in trying to push for larger stimulus checks for the American people. He actually spoke with former President Trump when former President Trump was flying back from Georgia on Air Force One and said that former President Trump should veto the stimulus bill unless $2,000 stimulus checks were included. Well, as it turns out, Josh Hawley ended up opposing the results of the election in the United States Senate. But despite all the negative feedback and despite all the blowback, it rang the cash register. Yup, as far as Senator Josh Hawley was concerned, it was raining money as far as his ambitions are concerned in the United States Senate, and maybe one day ambitions to be the President of the United States. Here's an article on your screen from Politico. Hawley hauls in $3 million after attempt to block election results. The Missouri senator collected more than 10 times what some of his colleagues have raised at similar points during their tenure. Here's some reporting from Politico. Hawley received more than 57,000 donations during the first quarter. He managed to raise nearly $600,000 during the 2.5 weeks following the January 6th Capitol incident, despite temporarily halting his fundraising approach. Now, this is a massive increase for Hawley. By comparison, he raised just $43,000 during the first quarter of the last election cycle immediately after taking office. Folks, he's not due for re-election until 2024, but he already has enough money to successfully run for re-election. And folks, just as we were about to wrap up production of this video, my team pointed out a new comment, a new clip from Senator Josh Hawley, the one and only. He was speaking with Tucker Carlson on Fox, and he said, Voters are living in fear that the banks are going to cancel them, that those big corporations are going to cancel them. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Let me know if you think the banks are going to cancel you, because this whole cancel culture phenomenon is something that again, politicians on both sides are using to their advantage to further drive a wedge, to further create tribalism. Let's take a look at this interesting segment featuring Josh Hawley, and then I want you to let me know in the comment section below what you think. Let's roll the tape.
I think voters already know it. I mean, they're living it. They're being censored on social media. They're living in fear of if these banks are going to cancel them, if these big corporations are going to cancel them. And I think that elected officials, Republican elected officials, are listening to voters.
There you have it, everyone. The incredible times that we live in, that tribalism that sells, the tribalism that is rampant in our politics. Folks, I want you to know, for me personally, it's not about the red or the blue. It's about the red, white, and blue. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm American. We are all Americans first, but tribalism sells, and that is a sad reality of the climate that we now live in. If you want to do something about this, talk to your lawmakers and tell them that you want both sides to work together. You don't want constant tribalism, constant bickering, constant arguments, constant attacks on each other in conservative or liberal news sources. That doesn't really help the country. Thank you so much for watching. Please click the like button. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications. I want you to know that I work very hard on this channel. All I ask of you is to simply take a second of your time and click the like button. That would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.